What's up, Chase Oaks? Hey, I'm Darby, and if you're normally like an online Chase Oaks person, I'm so glad you're here. Welcome back. And if you are in the DFW area, maybe you normally go to a campus, you'll know that we canceled services this weekend because it's freezing out. Apparently, like Snowmageddon is coming. And man, I'm bummed about that, but I am super happy that we still get to do online services right here this weekend, hopefully in your living room or wherever you're watching. I'm just super glad you're here. And hey, in a minute, we're gonna kick it to Jeff for week 3 of the story you're writing, but I do wanna make sure you know that story groups are starting, they're happening, they're gonna be fantastic. These are just short-term group experiences that follow along with the series we're in. And what's so magical about these groups is they're perfect. If you're new around here, if you're maybe curious about a group but don't want to commit your life away, they're 5 weeks and a really easy first time group experience. And so I really hope you'll get in one. I know I'm super excited to do one this year. And you can find out all the information about that at chaseoaks.org. You can also sign up and get all the details that you need there too. And so glad that you're going to do that. And hey, I'm so sad again this weekend because of the weather, all this stuff. Dream Team Saturday was canceled, which is such a bummer, but we are rescheduling it. So I hope to see you February 7th at Dream Team Saturday. It's gonna be amazing. It's for everyone who leads, serves, or maybe you want to lead or serve around here. It's gonna be an amazing time of all these fantastic people who make Chase Oaks happen, really coming together and getting to set some vision for the future, get to worship together. And I am just excited. We're kicking it out just a few weeks. It's gonna be awesome. Hey, wherever you're watching from, I hope you're cozy. I hope you get some hot chocolate, maybe some popcorn. And with that, let's kick it over to Jeff for week 3 of the story you're writing.
Well, welcome everybody to maybe a first in church history, a sermon done for an online service for Winter Storm Fern. That's what it's called. And that's why we're doing this. And I hope you're safe. I hope you're warm. I hope you're somewhere cozy as we do this online service. And we are continuing our series based on the life of David. Called The Story You're Writing, just thinking really intentionally about the story we're writing and kind of where's this ending up. David had a very imperfect story and yet ended up with a great legacy. And it's all about, with whatever chapter we're in, decisions, priorities, all that, where's it leading? And in the final chapter, is it leading to regret as we look back or appreciation as we look back and impact as we look back? And of course, that's what we all want. And today we're talking about a part of life that is true for everybody. Certainly we're going to see that in David's life, but it's true for every single life, that you and I will never become the people we want to be or accomplish what God has put us on this planet to accomplish without the right people around us. That every story has supporting cast, has a supporting characters, and the people in our lives who are with us and for us will either help us go further faster where God wants us, or will actually do the opposite. And so we're talking about, well, how do we cultivate the right kind of relationships, especially the right kind of friendships? My granddaughter, Eden, is 5, just turned 5, and she's going to school just one day a week. But whenever I ask Eden how school's going, she never tells me about the educational philosophy or about what they're learning or whatever. It's about her friends, right? And you think, yeah, she's 5. Of course, she's oriented around friends. The truth is, we're all just big 5-year-olds. Like that, we don't grow out of that. Friends are part of what make life wonderful. They add a lot to life, but they're also they're the people who shape us. They shape who we become, who you and I hang out with. That's kind of what we'll end up being like over time. And so, therefore, it's super important to make sure that we have friends that are deep and rich and real, but also ones that are helping us become the best version of ourselves. And of course, the problem right now in our world, in our culture, it is not easy to develop those kind of friendships. We are more isolated as a culture more than ever, as far as I know, certainly in my lifetime. more people, when they do surveys and stuff. And actually, very few people have the kind of friends that I think everybody is created to have. And so how can we buck that trend? Like, how can we cultivate the right kind of friends, people who are with us and for us in life that help us go further, faster, and make life more joyful, and us the best version of who we are, or of who we're becoming. And we're going to look at that in David's life with an iconic friendship in the Bible. Maybe the most iconic friendship in the Bible is David and Jonathan. And it's an incredible relationship that helped make David who he was. And we're going to dive into it, but I need to kind of catch us up in the story a little bit so we know kind of who Jonathan is and where he fit in David's story. So the first week of the series, we looked at how God had rejected the king of Israel, the very first human king, and he was kind of a disaster. God said, yeah, sorry, you're not going to be king for very much longer. I'm already raising somebody up. And through Samuel the prophet, he goes, finds David, who's a young kid, 15 years old at the time, is anointed for something. David doesn't know at the time that he's going to be the next king of Israel. Samuel, the prophet, knows. Saul doesn't know. Nobody knows that it's David, but he knows something significant is down the road, and eventually he'll figure that out. But before that, he has the David and Goliath story. That's what happens next for David. Changes everything for him. He goes just to deliver food to his brothers on the battlefront. David's probably a 16-year-old kid, sees the giant, and defeats the giant in the name of God. He becomes this really big deal, is pulled into the administration of Saul, becomes a key figure in the army as an officer and key leader. He is even pulled into Saul's family. Saul's so impressed with David that he marries off one of his daughters named Michal to David. So now he's in the royal family. And also in the royal family is Jonathan. Jonathan is the crown prince. He's the next in line to the throne. So now they're like brothers-in-law, and Saul is his father-in-law. And where we jump into the story with Jonathan and David is right when Jonathan meets David, and that's at the David and Goliath story. And instantly, there's this bond and sense of camaraderie. And right away, we see, I'm going to pull out three components because preachers are supposed to do threes. So the first of the component we're going to see is really alignment, is people who are on the road with us, helping us become the best version of us. And, well, here's the story. After David had finished talking with Saul after killing Goliath, Jonathan became one in spirit with David, and he loved him as himself. That phrase, loved him as himself, we're going to see multiple times in the story. That's a very powerful phrase. But the one I want to focus on is one in spirit, that they were one in spirit. The more literal way to translate it is their spirits were knitted together. I'm not a knitter. That's probably not a surprise, but I do get the concept, right, of how separate strings of yarn come together to form something. And they were just on the same page is another way to say it. They were one in heart, one in spirit, go in the same direction. These were two people who loved God, who wanted to make a difference, and therefore made a very powerful team. And that's why it's so important. When we're talking about these kind of friends, it's not just people that we enjoy, it's people who are actually on the same page with us, who are on the same journey with us. And therefore we can encourage each other as Christians, especially, to say, hey, let's follow Jesus together. Let's accomplish his purposes together. Because you and I don't grow out of peer pressure. Like, with teenagers and all that, we always think, well, who are your friends? Because that's so important. Well, we don't grow out of that. We end up becoming like the people we hang out with the most. Earlier this past week, I was cleaning out some stuff in my office, and I found this little pile of old photographs, and one of them was a Polaroid picture. So it's not the best picture. This is from like a long time ago when I was in 8th grade, and you can see the picture now. I'm in the hospital. I had broken my leg playing hockey, and some people were visiting me in the hospital. So you see the blonde-haired girl, it was Juliet. She's my girlfriend at the time. You see her friend, Angie. That was also my friend, but they were like best friends, inseparable. And then the guy named Kurt, who I was inseparable friend with. So from kindergarten all the way up until 9th grade, Kurt and I were, if you saw one, you saw the other. I mean, we were just always together, really close friends. Well, we did go to a different middle school. So this was in 8th grade, but we were excited because we were going to the same high school in 9th grade. all that was great. And then about a month into ninth grade, everything changed. Kurt went from being my best friend and super nice to being a jerk. And what was going on with me is that's also the time where I had become a Christian and was wanting to follow Jesus and involved in a church. So I had my church youth group friends, and then I had my school friends at that school, Kurt and others. And those were two different groups of people, two different geographies in the city. So they didn't really commingle. So I had kind of the church Jeff and my church friends, and then I had my school Jeff and my school friends. And my school friends were not doing what the church people were doing. They were not interested in Jesus. They were interested in, it was the 1980s, being the biggest party, high schoolers in the 1980s. And was that group. And so Kurt, was kind of the ringleader of that group, was enough of a jerk that he pretty much just shoved me out of that friend group at school, and which shoved me into my church friends. And that's who became my closest friends. But it's still so confusing for me at that age that he would, why is he being such a jerk? I didn't see him until college. He got expelled from school in 10th grade. And if you want to get expelled, kids, all you have to do is grow marijuana in the high school greenhouse. That's what he did. Not the best decision. But he got expelled, moved out of town with his dad. And I saw him when I was in college, and he apologized to me. He's like, hey, I know I was a real jerk in 9th grade and after that, but here's the deal. I saw the direction you were going. I saw how you were following, you wanted to follow after Jesus and do all that. And I knew where my life was headed, and it wasn't going to be great. I wasn't strong enough to just go with you and that whole other church thing. And I knew that you could either be dragged down by us, or I could shove you off into everything that I think God had in store for you. And I had no idea, but it was impactful because, the people we hang out with the most, they say that, right? Just if you want to know what you're going to be like in 5 years, look at the 5 people who you're closest with now. And that's probably a pretty good picture. And so therefore, it's just so important to relate broadly with everybody and love everybody and have relationships with all kinds of people. But we need a crew. We need we need people who are with us and for us in life, who are on the same direction and helping us. And Jonathan was certainly that for David. But that by itself won't really do a whole lot, just because you care about the same things and want to follow God. Without the next component, not much is going to happen. And the next component is commitment. And man, these guys illustrate that in a really powerful way. And in 1 Samuel 18, I'm going to read the same verse I just read, and then we're going to read the rest of the little passage. It says, after David had finished talking with Saul, Jonathan became one in spirit with David, and he loved him as himself. From that day, Saul kept David with him and did not let him return to his family. And Jonathan made a covenant with David, a promise, a vow, a covenant, because he loved him as himself. Jonathan took off the robe he was wearing and gave it to David, along with his tunic, and even his sword, his bow, and his belt. So this was a unique relationship because Jonathan and David decide to make a covenant together, a vow, a promise. And to commemorate that, Jonathan does something that in that culture would have communicated a whole lot externally. Because as crown prince, he would have had this outer robe and inner robe that was like really fancy. And he would have had the best of weaponry that everybody would have envied. And he removes that and gives it to David as a commemoration of this covenant. It's actually the same thing that the crown prince or anybody would have done that was like a noble. If you were captured and you were surrendering, you would do the exact same thing. So he was essentially sort of surrendering to David. He was saying, hey, my life isn't just about me anymore. It's also about you. It's about us. It's a covenant relationship, a covenant friendship. Now, in our culture, we don't really do covenant friendships like this, but we do know a little bit about covenant relationships because there's this thing called marriage, if you've heard of that, right? And at the core of marriage it's not just a normal relationship, because at the core of it is the promise, is the vow that you make. And that's what makes marriage unique. It's a promise not just to stay together, it is that, but it's a promise that's more powerful than that. It's saying, hey, I'm going to love you. I'm going to prefer you. I'm going to put you ahead of me. And there's going to be times that we're not going to feel like we want to be married. I'm going to be so mad at you. I'm going to be so hurt by you. But you know what? We're going to work through it. And I'm not going to give up easily. Like, we're going to work through this. And well, that does make, when people get that and they pull that off, marriage, because of that covenant, creates this safety that a really deep and intimate relationship requires with two people who are for each other, love each other, aren't going anywhere. They're going to work through their stuff. It's the only way you're going to get to the kind of relationship you really want, is that promise, is that commitment. And at times it's going to be tested. And that's what Jonathan and David were doing in a friendship. And that may seem weird in our culture, but that's just because our culture is weird. I think there are other cultures where this kind of thing happens, and certainly here it happened. And I think it's something we should pull into our modern life, is to say, hey, let's not just have marriage, committed relationship called marriage, but what if we had committed friendships like that, where we'd say, hey, you know what? I want us to have a bond together, a commitment together, and I'm going to make some promises. And maybe those promises are, hey, I'm going to be, when life is tough, I'm going to be there for you. Or when something needs to be shared, it may even be difficult to say, but you need to hear it. I'm going to love you enough to say it. Or, you know what? I'm not going anywhere. Like, I'm with you and for you in life, and I'm going to trust you're going to be with me and for me in life. And whatever I can do to help make your life flourish, I'm in. Like, it's not just about me. My life is partly about you. And think about having a friend like that. And one of the reasons David became David is because David did have a friend like that. And it was a powerful commitment. And I hope you have people in life that at least get close to that. I mean, I know I'm thankful for people in my life that I know are going to be with me and for me no matter what. But with one of those, I had a conversation this past week of saying, hey, what would it look like to up our intentionality, to up our commitment level? And what would that look like? It was an incredible conversation. And I think we'll have fruit in my life. So it is a commitment. But there is a time where that commitment is going to be tested, which brings me to the next component. So we've talked about alignment, people who are on the same road with us, and talked about commitment. But the other part of that commitment, when it's tested, is sacrifice. Is a kind of relationship that will sacrifice for each other. It'll basically say, I'm going to do whatever love demands. Doesn't matter how much it costs me. I'm going to do whatever's best for you. And that's quite a commitment when it gets sacrificial, because commitment's easy when it's easy, right? Just like we talked about in the last week of the series, the right thing to do is always the right thing to do. And when the right thing is easy, well, okay, that's easy. But when the right thing to do is hard, well, then it's hard. Same way in friendship. It's like, saying, hey, I'm here for you no matter what is easy when it's easy. But when it's not easy, when it's tested, when it's going to cost me something, well, that's when friends are really put to the test. And you see that in a big way in the rest of the Jonathan David story. Because if you think about what's happening, if you know the story, if not, I'll catch you up, right? So David becomes this big shot and everybody's all excited about David. But then Saul, the king, gets really threatened by that. And he's like, hey, he's more popular than I am. Maybe he's going to take my throne. And then bingo, he's like, bing, bing, bing. You know what? That's what God said, that somebody would take my throne one day. I think this could be the guy. And instead of submitting to that, he decides, I got to get rid of this guy. I've got to kill him. And so he starts this whole process of trying to kill him. David runs for his life. He's on the run for 15 years. This goes on as Saul is trying to find him and put an end to his life, to put an end to the threat. And you've got Jonathan, who's his best friend, who's Saul's son. You can see the situation Jonathan is in. It's a tough situation to be in. For one, he is the crown prince. He is Saul's son, which means he really is the next in line to the throne. And he and David talk about that. I don't have time to read the passage, but they have this whole discussion where Jonathan's like, hey, I know you're God's person. And I'm not going to be king. God made you king, and that's okay. I will serve you in any and every way that I can, which in that culture, that would never happen, where somebody who is supposed to be the king would say, you know what, I'm just not because I think God wants you to be king. I mean, that's amazing, sacrifice in itself. But then you think about the situation, the difficulty that Jonathan was in, because his king and his father is out to kill David. And Jonathan has to choose. Like, am I going to pick sides? He's got to pick sides. Is he going to side with Saul or is he going to side with David? And in his friendship, and also because of his allegiance to God, who he knows has chosen David, he's like, yeah, I'm going to honor my dad as much as I can, but I'm going to protect David. And so you see that in the story where, Jonathan sticks up for David with his dad, and occasionally we'll get to a point where you seem like there's a little bit of progress. In fact, that does happen where Jonathan gets real excited because he has this conversation with Saul, and he feels like he's made headway. And Saul's like, yeah, I know I shouldn't kill him. He's God's anointed. He's God's chosen one. And so Jonathan goes and he finds David. And he says, hey, I think we're going to be okay. Like, I think I got Dad, where we need it to be. And they have this whole conversation where they reiterate the vow. And it says in 1 Samuel 20, so Jonathan made a covenant with the house of David, saying, may the Lord call David's enemies to account. And Jonathan had David reaffirm his oath out of love for him because he loved him as he loved himself, that same phrase. But they reaffirmed that commitment. They reaffirmed that oath. And they come up with this little signal. So David's like, hey, I know you're excited. You think you've won your dad over and he's all godly now and not going to kill me, but I'm not sure I'm ready to trust that. So why don't we just put that to the test a little bit? And so they come up with this way where Saul and Jonathan are together. They're in this field. David is out up above, hidden where he can see. And they come up with this little way that Jonathan can signal that either it's safe to come out and try to interact with Saul, or nope, it's all off, don't do it. And so Jonathan interacts with his dad, and his dad is not in a good frame of mind. Is like, no, I'm going to kill that guy. I'm going to kill David. And they have this argument, and Saul gets so mad at his son because he realized, hey, you care more. You're sticking up for David. You've chosen his side. And he gets so angry, he does two things. One, he hurls verbal abuse. And I actually like the phrase. He says, you are the perverse son of a wicked mother, which I don't know why I like that phrase, but it's kind of fun. I mean, to just play around with next time I get frustrated with somebody, you're the perverse son of a wicked mother. But for those of you who are moms, I just apologize. I mean, why do moms always... why do everybody blame moms? It's always mom's fault somehow. So moms, sorry about that. But he says, you're the perverse son of a wicked mother. But it's not just he hurls words. He also hurls a spear. He throws a spear at him, at his own son. And he's not trying to warn him. He's trying to shish kebab him. He's trying to end his life. And he misses. But it's pretty obvious to everybody at that point that, I don't think Saul's all of a sudden this great guy and not going to kill David. And so, David goes away, and the search continues and David's life is turned upside down. And then after a while, Jonathan, probably years later, Jonathan hears that David is deeply, deeply discouraged because he's on the run. He has to go to these neighboring countries to try to find refuge with those kings and their armies. And it's this whole thing and goes on forever. Like I said, 15 years. And Jonathan hears that David is deeply discouraged. And so Jonathan's like, you know what? I made a promise. I can't tell my dad about it, but I'm going to find him and I'm going to encourage him. And so we read in 1 Samuel 23, it says, and Saul's son Jonathan went to David at Horesh where he was. And I love this phrase, helped him find strength in God. Helped him find strength in God because he had no strength in God. He had lost it. At one time, David was faithful and strong and encouraged, but it had gone on so long that he just didn't have it anymore. He was discouraged. He was hopeless. And I don't know if you've ever been there or not. My guess is if you've lived long enough, you have. Maybe you're there right now. And that's why it's so important to have people in our lives who can help us find strength in God. And Jonathan risks his life. I mean, if Saul had found out that Jonathan had gone to find David and didn't tell him where he was and all that, he would have been shish kebabbed. That time he probably wouldn't have missed. But Jonathan was like, hey, I'm going to be there for my friend. And he was. And they have this incredible conversation. They reaffirmed the vow. And what they don't know is that that's the last time they'll see each other. They assume they're going to see each other again, but Jonathan goes back. And David is way much more encouraged and does find strength in the Lord because of a life-giving friend. And that's what friends do. That's why they're so important. Not just when things are great, but when things are not great. And that does take sacrifice when we're there for each other. I remember in my own life, I've shared over the years how, 30-something years ago now, but I went through a time of clinical depression. And I that's not even my personality. I mean, it threw me for a loop. I didn't know what to do with it. It went on for months. And it was dark and it was deep. And I was at a hopeless place. I couldn't see light. I couldn't feel hope. And I was in another state at the time. I'd finished graduate school, gone away before I came back here when that was going on. And there were a couple of friends that, Jack Warren, who's on our staff, we've been friends forever. Bruce Miller, that was on staff here and then started Christ Fellowship in McKinney, and we're still great friends to this day. We meet together every Monday morning for breakfast and have for 30 years. But this was a long time ago, and I was so hopeless, and I would call them sometimes in the middle of the day. I mean, these are busy people, and I just needed to talk it out. And sometimes this would be like 20 minutes, 30 minutes, 40 minutes of me just talking out of my darkness. And they didn't have time to answer that call. They didn't have time to sit with me on that call. They had a life, like they had busy jobs. But they did anyway. And they let me just emote and process, and they gave me perspective. They helped me find perspective, find strength in God. And looking back, if they hadn't been willing to do that, I'm not sure I ever would have gotten out of that time. But that was one of the key things that God used, was key friends in my life who were willing to be there for me when I didn't have anything to offer that was positive. I mean, all I had to offer was just a pain or dragging people down is the way it felt. But they loved me enough to say, yeah, we don't care about that. We're going to enter into that with you. And they entered into the darkness and they helped me out of it. And life-giving friends do that. And that's why we need people who are with us and for us in life. Those are key friends. Well, Jonathan was that for David. And as I said, they didn't know it, but that last conversation would be their last conversation. Because not long after that, Jonathan and Saul both are killed in a battle. They both get killed in the same battle. And David finds out about it. He knows he's going to be king. And you think, his men and stuff and soldiers are like throwing a party. And David's like, no, there's no party here. God's anointed, Saul, has been killed, as well as his friend. And he writes a song. They do a funeral for Saul and David. And it's interesting because David doesn't celebrate Saul's death either. He mourns Saul's death, and he certainly mourns Jonathan's death. And he writes a song. David was a songwriter, as well as a king and military leader. And he wrote a lot of the Psalms in the Old Testament. And he writes a song called the Song of the Bow. And here's just a little part of that song. How the mighty have fallen in battle. Jonathan lies slain on your heights. I grieve for you, Jonathan, my brother. You were very dear to me. Your love for me was wonderful, more wonderful than that of women. I mean, you hear the pain in that, right? You feel it. He's grieving his friend. And he said, you're more valuable to me than pretty much anybody. And now you're gone. And he realizes that he's lost something so valuable. And he had. Now, the sad part of the rest of David's story is that not only does David lose Jonathan, that life-giving friend that's with him and for him in such a powerful way, but he never develops that kind of friendship again. I don't know why. I mean, when you look at the story, Jonathan does seem to be the initiator. David's more the, oh yeah, that sounds great kind of guy. And my guess is Jonathan was more relational with David. I can relate to David that way. For some people, you're just naturally intentional in your relationships. That's awesome. Some of us aren't, and that's me. I have to really work at being that way because I'm more task-oriented than relational-oriented. And maybe that's what was going on. I don't know. But it was a huge mistake for David because David from then on is going to become increasingly isolated in life. And that's going to set up a story that we're going to tell in a couple of weeks where David has this really big fall. And it's really the anatomy of a fall. Like how can somebody who's so godly fall so far? And that's what we're going to be talking about in that week. But right here is a big clue is if you and I allow ourselves to get isolated, then that's not going to end well. And that's what happens with David. Now, none of us want that. We don't want to end up that way. I don't think we want to live an isolated life. We want, in fact, to live a life where we are, have people with us who are on the journey with us and help us get there further faster, become the best version of ourselves. And yet that's not easy in our culture. And so what do we do with this? And part of it is alignment, like it starts there. So part of it is, well, how do you find the right kind of people? If you want people that are going to be not just friendly and people you have chemistry with and enjoy, but people who are on the journey with you, like if you're a Christian, to say, well, I probably need another Christian, like who can help me follow Jesus, and we can do that together, and we can fulfill God's purposes and encourage each other to do that. Well, that's really important. If you're a Christian wanting to follow Jesus, you need that's the only way it's going to happen. But how do you find those people? And I'd say a couple things. I love the Andy Stanley quote about dating, where he says, if you're looking for, well, how do I find the right kind of person? And he says, become the person you're looking for is looking for. Become the kind of person the person you're looking for is looking for. Because if you really want the right kind of person and they're looking for the right kind of person, if you're not the right kind of person, they're not looking for you. So start with become the kind of person the person you're looking for is looking for. If you want somebody who's passionate about Jesus and who's following his purposes and then become that kind of person. But then also put yourself in environments where you can find people who have that in common. Church is a great way to do that. To not only come and sit in a row, but get in a circle, like get in a group or join some kind of ministry. It could be youth ministry if you're a student, or college ministry, or young adult ministry, or get in a small group, or do something in women's, whatever. Just find a way to serve on a team and get in a place where you can find people that will be aligned and that you could go the same direction. And then think about commitment. I mean, some of you maybe already have some aligned friends and all that, but what would it look like to you? It's what I did, just to have a conversation or to think about, hey, how could we up the commitment level of our relationship? And I talked to two people about that. Like, how can we be more intentional about our friendship, and what would that look like? And like, what would you want from me? Like, if I'm going to promise, hey, you know what, I'm going to be there for you, but to make that more specific, like what might that look like? And I gave some examples before, but it could mean, hey, you know what, when life gets hard, I'm not going anywhere. I'm going to be there. Or, man, I'm always going to tell you the truth. I'm always going to, if there's a hard thing to say, I'm just going to say it because I love you enough to say it, even though it's not, even though it's comfortable, whatever it is. You just think about, just have a conversation about your relationship and take it to a more intentional level. And on a sacrifice thing, there may be somebody in your life that you just need to sacrifice for. Like maybe somebody you've been avoiding a little bit, and stop avoiding them. Like, be there for them. Even if they say, no, I don't want you to be there for them, just be there for them. I remember hearing a pastor one time talk about his wife was in the hospital and she ended up dying, but she was in that process. And he was so dark and so depressed. He told everybody in the church and everything, I don't want to talk to anybody. You can, if you come, I'm not going to see you. I need to journey this alone. And one of his friends traveled from out of state to say, yeah, forget that. And he just let him know, hey, look, I'm in the waiting room. I'm going to be there however many weeks it takes. I'm just going to be in the waiting room and every day. And you never have to talk to me. But if you want to, you know where I'll be. I'm going to be in the waiting room. I'm going to be praying for you. And ended up being a couple weeks. And for the first week, he didn't go out there, but eventually he did. But it was just a friend who was willing to show up. And there may be somebody you just need to show up. You need to make the call. You need to write the letter. And let me encourage you to do that, because it's easy in life not to understand how valuable these friends are until you get back to the end of life and realize, wow. And so let me encourage you to take whatever step you can take to have to develop the right kind of people and to build the intentionality in the right kind of relationships, because it's the only way we'll become who God really wants us to become and accomplish what God wants us to accomplish, if we have people who are with us and for us in life in a really deep way. There's a proverb that says, a man of many acquaintances will come to ruin, but there is a friend that sticks closer than a brother. And we're talking about the kind of friends that are even closer than like brother, sister kind of relationships. And by the way, ultimately, that verse, I think, kind of prefigures the kind of relationship that Jesus wants with you. And as we go to God in prayer, as we think about our human relationships, know also that God actually wants to be our friend. When we think about a friend that sticks closer than a brother, that passage, I think, really prefigures Jesus and the kind of relationship that he wants. And it's amazing that, yeah, he is our Lord. He's all that, but he's also our friend. And it's the kind of part of the relationship that he wants. And therefore, it doesn't matter who you are or whatever, that's the relationship God wants. And he made that possible. He came here to remove the barrier of sin that stood between us and God. That's why he died on the cross. He offers forgiveness as a gift and a whole relationship with him that starts forever, where he commits to us. And so as we pray, I want us to think about our human friendships, but also the opportunity maybe to begin or even strengthen our relationship with God. So let's pray. Father, thank you for just how you created us as human beings, as relational beings. And thank you for this story of Jonathan and David to show us how to build the kind of relationships that we're created to experience. And God, would you help us to find people who are aligned, help us deepen those relationships, to be committed, to be sacrificial. God, help us just be the kind of friends that you've called us to be and develop the kind of connections that we need. And also, God, pray about our relationship with you, that you would strengthen that. In fact, let me invite you as a human listening to just talk to God right now yourself. Maybe it's begin a relationship with God, to say, God, thank you that you want to be my friend and committed to me and to know me that way. And I say yes to that. And I want to know you more and take new steps. That's beginning a relationship with God. Maybe for you, it's strengthening your friendship and relationship with God. Just say, God, I want to begin to spend time with you. I want to know you. I want to relate to you, and help me make that a greater priority as well. So, Father, we thank you. Thank you for your love for us. In Jesus' name, amen.
Hey, that was a great message from Jeff. I'm so glad we got to do this together this weekend in the middle of crazy weather. And thanks for joining us. Man, if you are craving some worship after that, there's so many amazing ways to get your worship fix. Definitely go check out the Chase Oaks Worship YouTube channel. You can hang out, listen to all the best songs there, and worship in your living room. And with that, I hope to see you next weekend at Chase Oaks, and have a good week. See you then.